This morning, I'm going to start off by saying this. Every person in this room, every single person in this room is finishing a sentence right now, whether they know it or not. To live is success. To live is the portfolio, the address, the lifestyle I built. To live is my beauty, my killer good looks. To live is finding the right person, being loved the way I need to be loved. To live is my family staying intact. To live is proving everyone else wrong and that I'm right. To live is staying numb from the challenges of the world. Now, you may not have said it. You may not have even thought about it until now. But something is filling in that blank. And whatever fills it is shaping your emotions, your decisions, your fears, and the way you face everything that's going to come at you this week. The Apostle Paul gives us one answer, and it changes everything. 2 weeks ago, we began a series asking why a man in a Roman prison could write one of the most joyful letters in history in the New Testament. We discovered that joy is possible even in chains, even when you're locked up in chains, because the news of Jesus' life, death, and resurrection was advancing through them. Last week, we introduced whether Jesus is your main thing or just an important thing alongside a bunch of other important things, right? When everything's important, nothing's really that important. Today is Easter Sunday, and today we're going to double down on that and really understand what that actually means. So this morning, we open our Bibles to Philippians chapter 1. You've got Bibles in your pews, you've got Bible apps, or you can follow along on the screen as I read through it. Philippians chapter 1. Starting in verse 19. For I know that through your prayers and God's provision of the Spirit of Jesus Christ, what has happened to me will turn out for my deliverance. I eagerly expect and hope that I will in no way be ashamed, but will have sufficient courage, so that now, as always, Christ will be exalted in my body, whether by life or by death. For to me to live is Christ, and to die is gain. If I am to go on living in the body, this will mean fruitful labor for me. Yet what shall I choose? I do not know. I'm torn between the two. I desire to depart and be with Christ, which is better by far. But it is more necessary for you that I remain in the body. Convinced of this, I know that I will remain, and I will continue with all of you for your progress and joy in the faith, so that through my being with you again, your boasting in Christ Jesus will abound on account of me. This is God's word. There's one sentence in this passage, 10 words. Everything else Paul writes is basically context for this one sentence. And this one sentence is either the most delusional thing you've ever written or ever read, or it's going to be the most important thing that you hear all year. That sentence is verse 21. For to me to live is Christ, and to die is gain. That's the whole sermon this morning. 2 halves, 1 sentence. Because here's what that sentence means when it's actually true in a human life. You see, real joy isn't on that list that I shared earlier, right? The Palm Beach lifestyle, the relationship, the beauty. No, real joy is found in a person you cannot lose. To live is Christ. See, Paul fills in that sentence without hesitation. To live is Christ. Not to live for Christ, to live is Christ. Now let me help you understand, that's a different thing entirely. Right? If I said I live for my work, I'm telling you where all of my effort is pointing towards. Christ is my goal, my direction, my aim. That's one thing. But Paul doesn't say that. He says to live is Christ. See, Christ isn't his goal. Christ is his life. I mean, if you stripped away everything else from him, Christ would still be there, all the way down, through and through. If you think of it this way, when someone says, music is my life, they don't mean music is something they work toward. They mean music is what they're made of. It's everything. It's in everything to them. It's not something that they do. It's what they are. Paul is saying the same thing about Jesus. Christ is not where Paul points to. Christ is saying that Christ is what Paul is made of. Now this sentence causes a question to come up. What organizes your life? What is your life centered around? Not what you believe, not what you put at the top of your priority list, but what is the thing that drives you? What's the thing that drives your decisions at 7 a.m. on a Wednesday when nobody else is watching? Because whatever that is, that's your sentence. To live is blank, whatever that is. And here's how you find out if you're not sure. If you're struggling to think through this, let me give you some diagnostic questions to really help you think through this. What do you run to for comfort when things are just falling apart? Not what should you run to, what do you actually reach for? What do you daydream about? What's the thing your mind is so fixated on the most? What are you afraid of losing? What are you most afraid of losing in your life? Or how about this? What makes you feel like you actually matter? That you're actually worth something? See, Paul's answer is Christ. And a Roman prison proved it. Chains around the clock, career over, separated from everyone he loves, possible execution. By every measurement the world uses to decide whether someone's winning or losing, Paul is losing. And yet his joy is completely intact. Which means whatever is consuming Paul is none of those other things. I know we have a few engineers in the room. Engineers call this a stress test, right? You apply enough pressure until you find out what something is actually made of. And look, you've all felt that. A diagnosis, a financial hit, a relationship breaking. Look, pressure in life, it doesn't just hurt. It hurts. Pressures of life, it can hurt. It can be challenging. It hurts. But it doesn't just hurt. It reveals anger, fear, anxiety, despair, things you didn't even know were in there. And what starts coming out of you in those moments shows you what you're really living for, what you're really trusting in. And Paul's stress test is prison with a possible execution verdict. And what that pressure reveals in him is Jesus, all the way down, through and through. Now, most of us can't say that. Think about the novel The Great Gatsby. For Gatsby, it was Daisy. He built everything around her, his money, his house, his life. He believed that if he could just get her, if he could just get Daisy, everything would finally be right. But she couldn't carry the weight. And when she collapsed under it, so did he. Friends, I need you to understand something, right? The lesson from Gatsby, the lesson I'm trying to help you to see is that when you take any created thing, if you take any created thing from this world and you make it your everything, it will either crush you or you will crush it. And friends, we all have a Daisy. Something or someone we're afraid of losing. In fact, I'll tell you this. You show me what you're afraid of losing, and I'll tell you what you're actually living for. And look, I say that, look, I know that because I've been there. I've lived it. Let me help you to see what my sentence looked like before I knew what was actually filling it. See, I grew up in a Hindu family, genuinely devout. Maybe even more so than my parents. I would go to the temple. In fact, I would ask my parents, I would beg my parents at times to take me to the temple. I did the rituals. I was committed to the faith. When I was about 14 years old, there were these reports coming from India that Ganesh, the elephant god, was blessing people, right? That the statues were drinking milk offerings from spoons. So my mother gets a call from our relatives in Mumbai. We get super excited. We went to our mini at-home temple and we started doing the ceremony, our ritual offering. So my mother put milk in the spoon and we served it up to our God. We closed our eyes, served it up to the Ganesh statue. We closed our eyes and we just sat there and we waited. And we waited and we waited. And church, you're not going to believe what happened next. You're not going to believe this. We waited there, and then when we opened our eyes, well, the milk was still in the spoon. So my mother puts it down. She looks at me and she says, "Beta," which is son in our language. Looks like the gods aren't going to bless us right now. I went to school that day angry. And actually, I started asking questions I had never asked before. Maybe there is a God, but maybe there isn't. Either way, for me, right now, it's irrelevant. So I did what most of us do. I swapped one answer for another. Popularity became my main thing. Then success. Then wealth. And by the time I was in my early 20s, my wife and I had launched our first successful company. I started buying fancy cars, jet boats, real estate. I started showing it off to everyone, and soon people twice my age started looking up to me. I felt for the first time like, wow, I had made it. But then I needed a new goal. Because every time I hit the number, I walked away empty. You see, there was this hunger inside of me. There was this hunger that nothing in this world could satisfy. So I kept moving the goalpost. But you know what I never did? I never actually stopped to ask the question, is all that I'm chasing after, is it actually worth my life? I mean, I had never actually done the examination that Paul's describing in this passage. I just kept living for all these things without examining it. So here's what I want you to do right now. Not later, right now. At your seats, I want you to fill in the sentence honestly. To live is what for you? Not the answer that sounds right in church. What's the real answer? Let me give you a few other diagnostic questions that might help you think this through. Look at where your money actually goes. Where do you spend your money on most? And I'm not talking about the essentials. I'm not talking about your mortgage or your rent payment or food. I'm not talking about all that. After all the essentials, where does most of your money go? It might be the thing you're living for. What do you spend most of your time doing when nobody is telling you what to do? What are you fixated on? What are you consumed by? Maybe you're anxious right now. What are you anxious about? See, you think through those questions, and you're going to find your answer. Whatever that is what you're living for. You see, for Paul, to live is Christ. The question is whether you know what goes in your sentence. Because whatever goes there, that is what you're built on. And now Paul doesn't stop there. He goes further. And the second half of this sentence, I'm giving you a heads up. It's not a comfort. It's a test. It reveals whether the first half is actually true of you. He says to die is gain. To die is gain. Try telling someone on the street that today. To die is gain. They're going to look at you and think, what are you talking about? To die is gain? What craziness are you saying? Look, this is not how human beings actually think about death. Death is loss. Death is the end. Death is what we spend our lives trying to avoid and not think about. So how is it possible? How does Paul say this without flinching? How does he say to die is gain and mean it? Because he does mean it. In fact, he says elsewhere, he desires it. You look at verse 23. He says, I desire to depart and be with Christ, which is better by far. Better by far. Right? He's not performing courage. He's done the math. Well, let me explain. Here's the math. If to live is Christ, if Jesus is what your life is actually made of, then death can't take your life. Death actually gives you more of what your life already is. You go from knowing Jesus partially to knowing him fully. You go from the presence of Jesus in part to the presence of Jesus without limit. Death, in other words, is not ending, it's arriving. And look, this isn't a theory for Paul. This is what he is living in real time. In fact, he's going through a tension. And he opens it up to us so that we can see what tension he's going through. In verses 22 and 24, he says, if I'm to go on living in this body, this will mean fruitful labor for me. See, for Paul, to stay alive means fruitful work for the churches he loves. It's a good thing. To die means to go and be with Jesus, which he calls far better. So he's torn between two good options, not two terrible ones. That's the point. But here's what makes it a test. Here's what makes it a test. The math only works if to live is Christ is actually true for you. See, because if to live is your business, to die is loss. If to live is your financial status, to die is loss. If to live is making sure your family stays intact, well, to die is loss. If to live is your social media following, to die is loss. If to live is your relationship, to die is loss. Are you guys starting to track with me? Are you understanding what I'm getting at? If to live is being right all the time, to die is going to be a loss. If to live is anything on the list other than Jesus, guess what, folks? To die is going to be a loss. Why? Because everything on that list is losable. The only joy you cannot lose is Jesus. To live is Jesus. To die is Jesus. It is all about Jesus. That is why Paul has a joy that he cannot lose. Not because his circumstances are good, but because both answers are Jesus. He can't lose either way. How many of you can say that this morning? Not as a Sunday churchy answer, but as your actual life. As your actual life. So to die is gain isn't a comfort for everyone in this room. It's a mirror. It shows you whether to live as Christ is actually true for you. Not whether you believe it, whether it is actually true. See, when theologian John Owen was dying, he had his secretary write a letter for him. The secretary begins the letter with, I am still standing in the land of the living. Owen stopped him. No, change that. Write this instead. He says, I am yet in the land of the dying, but I hope soon to be in the land of the living. Here's what he meant. This world, it's not your real home. We're all moving toward death. But for the person whose life is built on Christ, what comes next is real life. See, this is a man who's done the math, and his confidence came from an event, the resurrection. The moment Jesus Christ walked out of a sealed tomb 3 days after he was crucified and buried. Not a metaphor, not a symbol, a historical event. And John Owen had confidence in that event. Now let me tell you where I was at with my own story. Still running away from that event. My wife, Sarah, started going to a Bible study. God began to work in her heart. So she starts going to church. Then she invites me to church. And I said, nope, hard no, pass. But I went a few times, really to keep the peace. And then there was this Christmas service, big production. And at the end of the service, pastor, asked everyone to close their eyes, bow their heads down, and for those who accept Jesus as your Lord and Savior, raise your hand up high and pray this prayer. So I kept my eyes open, and I started scanning the room to see what suckers fell for this brainwash. You know what I saw? I saw my brother with his hand raised. I was, oh. I don't know if he even knows this. He's here today. But I was furious. I felt like a betrayal just happened. Like he had cheated on our family, our roots, our Hindu religion. And in fact, after the service, I go to my wife, Sarah, and I said, look, if you want to do this whole church thing, I respect it. That's fine. Go for it. But leave me out of it. I'm done. She said, okay. A few days later, middle of the night, she wakes up from a very vivid dream that she believes was coming from God. And God was basically showing her, helping her to see that there was a separation happening between her and I. That she was going in one direction and I was going in another. And she started to cry out to God, God, there's got to be something you can do. Help me with this. My marriage can't end this way. God says to her, speak to him. Oh, okay, yeah. In the morning, I'll talk to him. Speak to him now. I'm not going to wake up my husband in the middle of the night. That's a bad idea. I'll just talk to him in the morning. My phone rings. I crawl out of bed. I go and pick it up. No one on the other line. God says to her, I've woken him. Now speak to him. So she starts speaking to me. She starts telling me about how God is doing all these amazing things in her life, all these amazing, testimonies and just great change that's happening in her life, all these blessings that are happening in her life. And then she tells me about the dream and about how we're separating. Like God's showing her that this separation is happening. I lost it. I started yelling at her. I said things that I regret, but the last thing I said to her was this. If God is showing you all these things, then why is he showing me nothing? I'm done with this conversation. I'm going back to bed. I jumped up into the bed, threw the blanket over me, and I just laid there. Now, looking back, I do see what was going on underneath it all. I was struggling with a few things. I was struggling with pride. I needed to be right. If Sarah was right and her God was real, well, that means I'd been wrong. And my identity that I had been building was an identity being built on being the one who had it all figured out. So she can't be right. What husband wants their wife to be right? Amen? Joking. I was going through some fear. I felt like I was losing myself. Not just a belief in Hinduism, but my identity, my family, my history, everything I was made of, I thought I might be losing. But the worst thing that was underneath it is I thought I was being manipulated. Like I was being pushed to give up one thing that I had, because let me tell you something. There's some of you in here who got invited by a friend or a family member. They brought you here not to manipulate, but because they care about you, because they love you. But sometimes, right, what I was going through, sometimes when someone is trying to take what you built your life on, everything starts to sound like a threat. And there's some of you in this room that cannot let go of what you're depending on, because it's not just a thing. It's who you are. Your career isn't just your job. It's your identity. Your relationship isn't just a relationship, it's your reason for living. Your certainty about something isn't just a belief, it's how you get to keep control. And the thought of Jesus Christ asking you to hold it loosely can sometimes feel like a threat, like you're losing yourself, like you're being manipulated into giving up the one thing you have. And look, guys, I understand that. I've lived it. But what if the thing that you're most afraid of losing was never meant to be your foundation? Well, it was never meant to be the ultimate thing that you're living for, was never meant to be the anchor of your life. What if the same Jesus who walked out of the tomb isn't just history to believe, but a foundation that you can stand on right now in the middle of whatever you're facing this week? What if Jesus is the one you were designed for? And I went back to bed that night, angry. Having said, if God is showing you all these things, then why is he showing me nothing? I meant it as a dismissal. I'm done with this. What I didn't know was that he was about to answer that question. But before I tell you what happened to me, I need you to see what Paul figured out. Because what Paul discovered in a prison cell is the same thing that was about to find me in that bed that night. See, Paul's in a prison cell. He might die tomorrow. And he writes that he's become convinced that he's going to remain, that he's going to live. Not because he chose to. See, the emperor at the time, Emperor Nero, he holds that verdict. But Paul had reasoned it through from his love for these people. And God had done something to have it settled in him. He came to a place where he believes God intends for him to stay. And look at how he receives that. He says, convinced of this, I know that I will remain and continue with you all for your progress and joy in the faith. So that through my being with you again, your joy in Christ Jesus will overflow on account of me. No bitterness, no disappointment, no wishing things were different. He was settled. He will stay for their growth and joy as they follow Jesus. See, this is what it looks like when what you're living for cannot be taken away from you. See, even the question whether you live or die stops being a threat, because for Paul, both answers are Jesus. How does he receive news like this with such open hands? Because he has seen something. He has seen something that changed everything. He has seen someone so great that everything else just lets go. The success, the portfolio, the reputation, the Palm Beach lifestyle, all of it gone quiet in the presence of something more real. Look, this is not a religious achievement. This is a response to a person. And not just any person. The only one who cannot be taken from you. The only one who does not crush you when you build your life on him. The only one who, when you fail him, doesn't walk away. In fact, he moves towards you. There's everything else in this world. Every other thing that you build your life on in this world says, if you fail me, I'm done with you. But Jesus says, you failed me, and I stayed. And that is the whole story of the Bible. While we were still running from him, he moved toward us. So here's who this person is. This is a person who didn't stay at a safe distance. He came. He took on flesh and bone and walked into the suffering of this world, not as an observer, as a participant. And here's why he came. You see, every person in this room, including myself, has filled in that sentence with something other than Christ. To live is something else. The Bible calls that sin. It means you're building your life around yourself and what you want rather than around God and what God made you for. And that has a consequence. It separates you from the only foundation that can hold you. It separates you from a relationship with our Creator. But Jesus, he came to deal with that separation. He lived the life none of us have ever been able to live. He lived a life where that sentence was perfectly filled with God. And then he went to the cross voluntarily. He took the punishment for every wrong answer, every life that was built on the wrong foundation so that we wouldn't have to. It was a swap. Wrong foundation for his right one. And then 3 days later, this Easter Sunday, this is what we're celebrating. He rose from the dead and he walked out of that tomb. Death couldn't hold him, which means the consequence has been dealt with. The separation is closed. The foundation is available. Friends, understand his life, his death, his resurrection, all for you. He went to the cross for the glory of the Father, and the way he glorified the Father was by giving himself up for you. It wasn't, let me help you understand something. It wasn't nails that kept him on the cross. It wasn't nails that held him on the cross. It was his love for you. So to live is Christ. For me, to live is Christ. Why? Because he gave himself up for me. And look, let me tell you something. Here's what I've discovered about Jesus that I cannot find anywhere else. Everything else I have built my life on eventually said, give me more or I'm done with you. Jesus is the only one who said, I will give more first. Before you're ready, before you clean yourself up, before you even knew you needed him, he came toward you. He went to a cross for you. And here's who he is. He is love at your worst. He is grace before you deserve it. He is joy that cannot be taken. He is life that does not run dry. This isn't what he gives you. This is who he is. And when he fills in your sentence, you don't just get a better life. You get him. And he's everything. And once you find that, everything else just loses its grip. Now let me show you when that actually finally landed for me in my life. See, I told you I went back to bed that night angry. Blanket pulled over me. Done with the conversation. Well, that's when it happened. Understand, I didn't go looking for God that night. He came looking for me. He began to show me things. He began to reveal himself to me through visions. I know it sounds crazy, and I'm not going to describe all of them right now. But one of the last things I saw was a hand reaching down toward mine. And as the hands were coming closer and closer together, a gold chain appeared on his wrist. And that chain transferred from his wrist over to mine. And as it did, a gold cross appeared in the center. That put me on a journey for the next few months to figure out what the heck is going on here. What is happening? And then one night, outside in the middle of the night, I look up at the sky and I see a figure come down. Figure of a person with bright white lights. No facial features or anything like that. Just this bright white light in the shape of a person. And I see two hands spread apart. And then I can see millions and millions of people. And I heard God say, I love you so much. Now share my love with the people of India. I need you to share the gospel to the people of India. In that moment, I knew this was Jesus. He's God. He's the only God. He's my God. The God I had been rejecting had come to find me. And understand, I did not fill in my sentence that night. He filled it for me. We sold everything we had. We moved our family to India. And what I discovered when everything else was on the table was this. None of it was the foundation. Jesus was. And when he became the foundation, when he became my foundation, I stopped being afraid of losing everything else. Before Jesus found me, everything I did was about lifting the name of Rajiv, the business, the cars, the real estate. It was all Rajiv, Rajiv, Rajiv. And then Jesus walked into my life and filled in my sentence. And now the only name I want to lift up is his. Jesus is everything. Jesus is risen. Jesus is alive. So to live is Christ. And that should be true for you. See, some of you came in here today not sure if any of this is real. I mean, you've heard he is risen your whole life and felt nothing. And look, I'm not going to ask you to feel it. I'm going to ask you to look at this man, Paul, a man in chains, facing death, yet more free than anyone else who walked in here this morning under their own power. That's not a feeling he worked up. Something happened. And I'm telling you, something happened to me too. Not because I was looking for it, not because I was spiritually ready, but because the same Jesus who walked out of that tomb is still pursuing people. He is still filling in sentences. So to live is what for you? See, now some of you, I suspect, know exactly what the answer is. You know what you've been holding on to. And you're still holding it. Not because you don't see the problem, because I think some of you are starting to see the issue of holding on to things that are created things of this world. I think you're starting to see that. But I think you're holding on to it because you don't know if you trust Jesus Christ enough yet to let it go. Let it go. Today's the day to say, Jesus is enough. Jesus is enough. And look, if this is true, and it is, then you'll start to realize that everything you built your life on is temporary. And everything you're afraid of losing, guess what, folks, is already slipping. But there's one thing, one person who walked through death and came out the other side. And he is risen, which means death lost. Which means the financial status, the relationship, the family, the reputation, all good things. These are not bad things. These are all good things. But everything you've been banking your life on, that you've been afraid to lose, none of it is meant to be your foundation. The only one that's supposed to be your foundation is the one who death could not destroy. And it's Jesus, and he is alive. And because Jesus rose, joy is not a feeling you create. It is a person you cannot lose. So to live is Christ, and to die is gain. He is risen. He is risen. Two things before we go this morning. If you are in Christ, you're going to walk out of here today. And probably by Wednesday morning or sometime on Wednesday, something is going to threaten what you've been living for. And you're going to feel it. You're going to feel that pull. That's not failure. It's the human condition. When that happens, and it will happen, you don't need a technique. You just need to come back. Come back to the one who filled in your sentence. Come back to the one who doesn't walk away. To live is Christ. And understand, that's not a standard you maintain. It is a person you return to again and again and again. And every time you return, he's already there. That's the life. Not perfect, but anchored. And if you've never trusted Jesus with your life, can I ask everyone to bow their heads, close their eyes? If you have never trusted Jesus Christ, understand, he already came looking for you. He proved it on a cross. He proved it in an empty tomb, and he is proving it right now by the fact that you are sitting in this room right now on this day. So this morning, say yes to him. Right now in your seat, say to him, Jesus, I need you. I have not been living for you. I've been living against you, but I need you. I believe you rose from the dead. Jesus, I want to give my life to you. I am yours.